So when Cyclone Idai hit Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe, my colleague Belinda, who most of you have been talking to, challenged me and the center and said, should we do something about it?
Nearly 240,000 homes are damaged or destroyed, and widespread areas experienced devastation. 7 weeks after Cyclone Idai struck, nearly 68,000 people remain displaced in over 80 temporary accommodation centers.
I think it's exactly the sort of initiative, the sort of leadership that we want to be seeing, not just as a business school, but as a university. Touching upon a topic that is so absolutely critical to the well-being of the people of Africa.
When we were arranging for this dialogue and looked around for people that we could bring together to share perspectives, one of the organizations we felt was very, very critical to the discussions is an organization called the Regional Psychosocial Support Initiative. They are called REPSI for short. They agreed because they and some people on the ground were conducting psychosocial support to the victims of the cyclones. And the CEO, as well as founder of that organization, had agreed to come and be one of the panelists. Unfortunately, like Becky said, 2 days ago, we received news that she had passed on. Norinoni is her name. I would like to request all of us to stand up and observe a minute of silence in her memory.
It's really my great pleasure to join you this morning and throughout the day.
Disasters, natural disasters, have robbed us of thousands and thousands of people, and those people have become statistics. But I just wonder, and I would like us to think about this. How many times we take a minute to pay respect to those people as human beings, as loss of human beings, which means a loss of part of ourselves, which has gone forever with them.
Another African tragedy. How do we even begin to at least put a human face to this tragedy?
The Emergency Response Health Week launched with the objective to reduce morbidity and mortality among the vulnerable population, targeting 438,243 children under 5 years and 179,222 women.
Sometimes when you talk about disasters, it's not only about the force itself and the impact of the disaster, but also sometimes it is about human failure to implement and to make efforts and put preparedness in place. It takes the president to declare it as a state of disaster, and it got into the second week before this was actually stated. We had more deaths, we had more pains, we had more people who were injured who could not get assistance.
DTM assessments across the border in Zimbabwe shows that nearly 69,000 people were displaced by the cyclone.
Our president was talking about it just earlier this week. He was accusing us, bureaucrats in government, of working in silos. We have a whole Department of Cooperative Governance, and part of each of our responsibilities is, of course, cooperative governance. Preparing for disaster is something we need to do within countries and between countries all the time, through all of our institutions that we have.
We know that women across the board experience greater poverty, greater vulnerability, less decision-making capacity, fewer opportunities for education, fewer opportunities for economic empowerment. We know that 20% of displaced women in general will be victims of gender-based violence requiring critical medical care. So there's all forms of gender-based violence. and what we call harmful practices.
I heard people speak about, the government this, the government that. I heard about, this framework, that framework. For us, it was not about any framework. For us, it was about, these are Zimbabweans, right? We need to save lives. We're going to go in there regardless of what the government will say or will not say. Number one, we knew that Zimbabwe, at that particular point, economically things were going well. So for us to even hold back and say, let the government go in first, was not going to work for us.
And the media as well, to the last gentleman's comment, when are we going back to do the follow-up stories? When are we going back to the fact this is going to take 3 to 5 years to support these communities to get them back to where they were? Who's documenting all the children that are now orphaned?
The emergency is what gets attention, but the devastation continues for people's lives, and I think we need to maintain the focus on rebuilding these communities. What are the solutions? What crops will survive climate change? We already have droughts. We've only had 1 year of favorable rainfall conditions since 2012 in Southern Africa. 1 year. So drought is no longer an emergency. Drought is the new normal. Cyclones may seem an aberration, but they will also become the new normal. How are we going to adapt our diets, the way that we produce food, the way that we consume it, to be more resilient to the impact of climate change and to adapt to the monumentality of the challenge before us?
How do you change the mindset of these young people who think the government owes them this, the private sector owes them this, without understanding the power of this spirit of voluntarism? I think also what Benito mentioned, the role that creatives can play, artists, musicians, actually the entire space. How do we help young people who we feel like they're left behind in terms of changing the mindset? Biko was talking about this mindset in the mind. How do we help them to change the way they think?
How do you get entitled people to become volunteers? We had a question over here.
And in Malawi, I've wondered, why is it that people always go back to the very same places where they came from? And the answers are that when the disaster strikes and everyone goes, people have no choice to go back. Do we have really a policy that can look at maybe 2-3 years? So I suggest 2 things. One, mapping. We know where a disaster strikes, especially floods. Like in Malawi, we know it's Palombe, Chikwawa, and Nsanje. We need mapping, and even in the other areas. So we should have mapping, and after mapping, we should put structures that are going to see people through 2-3 months when the excitement goes.
In most of people's minds, it's, you know what, with the cyclone this year, it's unlikely to have another one. But I mean, we've got no control over that. So that's why we're trying to do as best as we can. And we've targeted, the 52 schools in the area that were mostly affected. And that's where the messaging and the model is being implemented, with the hope that from there, we can scale it to more disaster-prone parts of Zimbabwe.
I think the Mama Krasa raised an interesting issue. I want to start by saying, as Africans, we need to put our house in order. Our houses are not in order. Disasters, we know they are going to come. We are not preparing for them financially. We want to have a disaster risk reduction or disaster management framework readiness.
It is much more important, in my view, to enable people to save their own lives, each individual life. Why? Because we will never be able to raise enough money to save all the lives that we need to save. And for every single life that you save, and I congratulate and commend all those who have been in the business of saving lives, there are 9 lives that are out of your sight that perished. So I'd like us to look at solutions when people are writing the reports on how we can provide, create robust systems for preparedness that are actionable at community level, at family level, at school level, at business level, before we even worry about national level, because people have to save their lives. Thank you very much.